Imagine this moment. It is late. The world is quiet. The house is still. But inside you, there is movement, a pressure, a questioning, a stirring of something deep. You feel God calling you forward, not with words, not with visions, but with a silent pull in the soul. Like something in you is being stretched, reshaped, awakened, and yet at the same time, there is resistance, not from the outside world, but from within, a hesitation, an old fear, a familiar voice that whispers, "You're not ready. You're not strong enough. You're not who God thinks you are." This is the inner war of every believer, not a war of angels and demons alone. Not a war fought with swords and fire, but a war fought in thought, identity, desire, faith, surrender. Is the war where childhood ends and maturity begins, where faith stops being something you know and becomes something you live. It is not the kind of war you can see, but you can feel it. The tightening of the chest, the silent wrestling behind the ribs, the conversations you have with yourself in the dark, the moments where your heart wants to believe, but your mind wants to protect itself, the place where who you were meets who God is calling you to become. This message is not for everyone. It is for the ones who have outgrown their old life, but are not fully standing in the new one yet. Who feel caught in between, who feel the pull of God, but also feel the weight of their humanity. This is not a sign of weakness. This is spiritual transition. The war inside you is not evidence that you are far from God. It is evidence that He is transforming you. You are not breaking. You are being rebuilt. This is what Jesus wants you to understand. And now we begin. The inner war does not begin when you start failing. It begins when God starts calling you to think differently, love differently, respond differently, walk differently, see yourself differently. Spiritual warfare does not start in rebellion. It starts in invitation. The moment God whispers, "Come closer," a part of you rises and another part resists, not because the old you is evil, but because the old you is afraid of being seen, afraid of being wrong, afraid of being disappointed again, afraid of surrendering control. Every believer reaches this threshold, where the heart wants God, but the mind fears what that might require, where the spirit is growing, but the flesh remembers. Comfort, where your faith begins to move from belief into identity. This is the war, not against demons, not against the world, but against the part of you that was shaped by yesterday. And hear me, if you are feeling this war, it means you are being called higher. This is not the war of the lost. This is the war of the becoming. You are not failing, you are transforming. The reason this war feels internal is because it is. There is a part of you that has learned to survive, to control, to protect, to guard, to stay hidden, to stay small. This version of you was formed in childhood pain, disappointment, fear, rejection, loneliness, silence. This version of you kept you alive, but it cannot take you where God is calling you. The war is not God fighting you. The war is God separating you from the version of yourself that learned to live without Him. This is why it feels like tearing, like pulling, like stretching, like something inside you is being unstitched. Because it is. God is not adding something on top of who you were. He is removing everything that was built on fear. He is returning you to the version of yourself that was always His. The child in you that could feel, trust, rest, believe, receive love, hope, buti, to get there. The old self must come undone, and that is why the war is silent. Transformation does not happen in crowds. It happens in inner rooms. Rooms only you and God know exist. This is why you cannot explain what you are going through. Because the transformation is too deep for language. You are not losing yourself. You are returning to yourself, the self you were before fear, before comparison, before disappointment, before you learned to hide your heart, the self God dreamed when He formed you. And yes, this process feels painful. Not because God is hurting you, but because he is touching the places that were never allowed to heal. It is the pain of being opened so that you can be reborn. This is why the fight is not outside. It is within. The old self is whispering, stay where it's familiar. The new self is whispering, walk with me. The war is the conversation between who you were and who you are becoming. And Christ is standing in the middle saying, do not fear the breaking. I am building you. God does not call you forward with force. He does not shout. He does not demand. He does not drag you. He whispers, because the voice of God does not enter through the mind first. It enters through the spirit. It feels like an ache you can't explain, a longing you can't put into words, a pull towards something you don't yet understand, a desire for more. Without knowing what more is, this is the call of eternity waking up inside of you. It does not begin with clarity. It begins with hunger, a hunger that nothing in the world can satisfy. Not success, not attention, not relationships, not distraction, not even religious performance. The hunger is not for experiences. The hunger is for God himself. But when your spirit begins to rise, the part of you that has lived on self-protection begins to tremble because it senses you are being called to become someone your fear cannot follow. And that is where the war intensifies, not because you are far from God, but because you are getting too close. The closer you move to who you were created to be, the louder your old identity tries to hold on. This is why, right before transformation, old emotions resurface, old patterns try to return, old temptations reappear, old doubts get loud, not because you are going backwards, but because your old self knows it is dying. The war is not proof of failure. The war is proof of baptism. You are crossing over. The enemy does not fight those who are stuck in spiritual sleep. He fights those who are awakening. If your heart is restless, if your spirit is stirring, if you feel like you are standing between two versions of yourself, it is because God is calling you forward, not to who you should be, not to who others expect you to be, but to who he designed you to be before the world touched you. This is why the voice of God feels like home even when it feels unfamiliar. It is the sound of returning. You are not becoming someone new. You are becoming yourself, the true self, the eternal self, the one that was hidden inside you all along. And the inner war is simply the sound of your resurrection. If God wanted to, he could silence every fear in a single breath. He could break every chain in a second. He could quiet every voice in your mind instantly. And sometimes he does, but more often he chooses another way, not because he wants you to suffer, but because he is growing something inside you, something that cannot be given, only formed. It is easy to trust God when you feel strong. It is another thing to trust him when everything inside you trembles. It is easy to have faith when your path is clear. It's another thing to have faith in darkness. It is easy to worship when your soul feels light. It is another thing to worship when your chest feels heavy. This is the maturity. God is forming in you a faith not dependent on emotion, a peace not dependent on circumstances, a love not dependent on being understood, a strength that does not break when pressure comes. The struggle is the place where conviction replaces convenience, surrender replaces control, identity replaces insecurity. The war is not punishment. The war is refinement. You are not being broken apart. You are being purified. God is not taking something from you. He is taking something off of you. The fear that made you hide, the doubt that made you hesitate, the shame that made you shrink, the memory that made you silent, the disappointment that made you guarded, is removing what was never part of you, so that what is truly you can finally breathe. This is why maturity feels like death before it feels like freedom. But what is dying is not your spirit. What is dying is the version of you that could not carry your calling. You are not losing yourself. You are shedding yourself. The self that fear built, the self that pain built, the self that silence built. And what remains is the self that God built. The war is the womb. Retention is the forming. The pressure is the shaping. You are not being destroyed. You are being reborn. There comes a moment in every believer's journey when the fight becomes too heavy to carry, not because you are weak, not because you lack faith, but because you were never meant to carry it alone. Up until now, part of you has still tried to understand everything, control the outcome, protect yourself from disappointment, maintain the image of strength. This is why the battle felt exhausting. You were still trying to survive in your own strength. But listen carefully. Maturity does not happen when you become strong. Maturity happens when you surrender, not surrender as defeat. Surrender as trust. The moment you say, "Lord, I no longer need to understand. I just need you." That is the moment the war begins to break, not because the storm ends, but because the storm loses access to your center. This is the sacred moment where the mind loosens, the breath deepens, the chest softens, the heart opens, the spirit settles. This is what the Bible means when it says, "Be still and know that I am God." Psalm 46:10. Stillness is not doing nothing. Stillness is giving the battle back to the one who never loses. Your surrender is not you falling, it is you being held. And once the battle passes from your hands to his, you begin to feel something you haven't felt in a long time. Peace, not the peace of the world, which is quiet only when life is stable, but the peace that lives in the middle of chaos. The peace that is not negotiated by circumstances. The peace that does not ask permission to remain, the peace that belongs to the one who is with you. When surrender happens, the war does not end outside you. It ends inside you, because finally you are no longer fighting God for control. You are resting in Him, and this rest is the gateway to transformation. After surrender, something subtle begins to happen. Not outside you. Within you, you begin to feel softer, not weak, soft. The hardness you developed to survive begins to melt. The walls you built to protect yourself begin to lower. The numbness you used to avoid pain begins to thaw. This is not emotional breakdown. This is the return of your heart. For a long time, you survived by shutting parts of yourself away. The part that trusted, the part that hoped, the part that felt deeply, the part that could love without fear. These parts didn't die. They just went quiet. But when God begins to rebuild you, He does not start with discipline. He does not start with behavior. He does not start with performance. He starts with the heart, because the heart is where you meet Him. And slowly, without force, without pressure, without demand, you begin to feel safe enough to breathe again, safe enough to be honest with God, safe enough to not pretend safe, enough to be real safe, enough to be seen. This is spiritual. Rebirth does not feel like revelation exploding. It feels like a quiet returning, a softening, a warming, a remembering of who you were before fear tried to shape you. God is not giving you a new identity. He is restoring the original one. The one formed in love, not in pain. The one formed in trust, not in defense. The one formed in heaven, not in the world. This is why transformation feels emotional, because the soul recognizes itself for the first time in a long time, and you realize you were never meant to live guarded. You were meant to live open, not unprotected, but protected by God Himself. This is maturity, not becoming stronger by building thicker walls, but becoming truer by learning to rest in God without fear. And when this begins, the war inside you is no longer a threat. It becomes a doorway, because now you understand what felt like breaking was actually becoming. You are not who you were, and you will not return to who you were. You are emerging. When your identity was rooted in your past, the battle felt like survival. When your identity was rooted in your mistakes, the battle felt like shame. When your identity was rooted in the opinions of others, the battle felt like exhaustion. But when your identity roots in Christ, the battle does not disappear. It loses its voice. because now the enemy no longer has a place to speak from. He used to speak through your memories, your regrets, your insecurities, your old stories, but now those places belong to Jesus. So the accusations do not land, the whispers do not anchor, the shame does not stick, because the voice of Christ in you becomes stronger than the echo of who you were. You no longer respond from fear, defense, confusion, self-doubt. You respond from stillness, rootedness, groundedness, identity. This is where peace stops being something you chase and becomes something you carry. You no longer try to feel close to God. You know you are one with Him, not because of effort, because of union. This is maturity. The enemy cannot enter a resting soul, not resting as in sleeping, but resting as in settled in who God is, who you are in Him, who He is becoming in you. This is the deepest peace, not the silence of the mind, but the alignment of the spirit. Your soul is no longer running, no longer reaching, no longer proving, no longer performing, no longer hiding. It simply rests, and rest is warfare, because a rested soul cannot be manipulated. Rested soul cannot be rushed. A rested soul cannot be frightened into obedience. Rested soul does not chase love, it lives from it. This is the maturity the war brought you into. You no longer fight to survive. You stand because you belong, and belonging defeats every weapon of the enemy. Now you see it clearly. You were not being destroyed. You were being reborn. The battle was not punishment. It was transformation. The pressure was not to crush you. It was to open you. The pain was not abandonment. It was God removing the old skin of your identity. The silence was not God leaving you. It was God waiting for you to hear Him within. The war did not come to end you. It came to introduce you to yourself, the version of you that loves without fear, trusts without explanation, worships without performance, walks without needing validation, rests without needing control. The version of you that is whole, the version of you that is free, the version of you that was always there, beneath the armor, beneath the walls, beneath the fear, beneath the survival, the real you, the you that belongs to Christ and has always belonged to Him. Welcome, you have crossed over. Be gentle with yourself now. You are learning to live from your spirit, not your wounds. Walk slowly, speak softly, breathe deeply. The war did not destroy you. The war revealed you. You are not the same, and you will not return to who you were. Prayer. Let this settle in your body, mind, and spirit. Place your hand on your chest. Close your eyes. Breathe in slowly. Pray, Lord, I surrender the old self, the self shaped by fear, the self shaped by pain, the self shaped by survival, and I receive the self you formed in love. The self that trusts, the self that rests, the self that knows you are near. Finish the work you began in me. Make my heart soft again. Make my soul peaceful again. Make my identity rooted in you alone. I am not who I was. I am who you say I am. Amen.